Assalamu'alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Faradisah Amelia and I will explain about survey. I think most people are familiar with survey. We often receive survey to record opinions as voter, to register approval of consumer products, and to measure opinion about electoral candidates. To many people, survey research is simply a survey instrument, such as a questionnaire or interview. Although we survey people using an instrument in educational research, the instrument is only one aspect of broader procedure in survey designs. So, next, what is survey research? Survey research is popular design in education. Research survey design are procedures in quantitative research in which investigators administer a survey to a sample or to the entire population of people to describe the attitude, opinions, behavior, or characteristic of the populations. So, in this procedure, survey research collect quantitative number data using questionnaire, for example, mail questionnaire, or interview, for example, one-on-one interviews, and statistically analyze the data to describe trends about response to questions and to test research questions or hypotheses. Then, survey designs differ from experimental research in that they don't involve a treatment given to participants by the researcher, because survey researchers don't experimentally manipulate the conditions. They can't explain cause and effect as well as experimental research can. Instead, survey studies describe trends in the data rather than over rigorous explanations. Survey research has much in common with correlation designs. Survey researchers often correlate variables, but their focus is direct more toward learning about populations and less on relating variables or predicting outcomes, as is the focus in correlations research. The next is, when do you use survey research? You can use survey research to describe trends such as community interest in school-bound issues or state or national trends about mandatory students' uniform policies. And you also use survey research to determine individual opinion about policy issues, such as whether students need a choice of school to attend. Surveys help identify important beliefs and attitudes of individuals, such as college student belief about what constitutes abusive behavior in dating relationship. They may be used to follow up with the graduates 5, 10, or 15 years after college to learn about their present careers. Surveys provide useful information to evaluate programs in school, such as the success of a robotics program in science education. Then, how the survey research developed? There are 2 points. The first is during the period from World War I to World War II. The modern survey, as we know, it began to emerge. So factors that contribute to its development were improvement in sampling technique and the development of different scales of measurements. And the second is, during World War II, survey examined issues central to the war effort, such as the morale of soldiers, production capacity for weapons, and the effectiveness of strategies. After that, this is the stage in the planning survey, whether the survey is large-scale and undertaken by some governmental bureau or small-scale and carried out by the lone researcher. The collections of information typically involves one or more of the following data gathering techniques, such as structured or semi-structured interviews, self-completions or postal questionnaires, standardized tests of attainment or performance, and attitude scales. Typically, 2. Surveys proceed through well-defined stages, though not every stage outlined in the box is required for the successful completion of a survey. And a survey has several characteristics and several claim attractions. Typically, it is used to scan a wide file of issues, populations, programs, and etc. in order to measure or describe any generalized features. It is useful that it starts from Marison 1993, page 38 to 40, and this is the characteristic. There are examples of surveys. The first is opinion polls, the second is test scores, the third is student preference for particular course, for example, humanity and science, and the last is reading survey. It states from Hoenfeld and Joel 1978, there are three prerequisites to the design of any survey are the specifications of the essay purpose of the inquiry and the populations on which it is to focus, and the last the researchers that are available. So its considerations of each of these key factors in survey planning can be illustrated in relation to the designs of an educational inquiry. The next, the purpose of the inquiry, such as the first survey's general purpose must be translated into a specific central aim, and the second phase of the planning involves the identifications and itemizing of subsidiary topics that relate to its central purpose, and the third phase follows the identifications and itemizations of subsidiary topics and involve formulating specific information requirements relating to each of these issues and the populations upon which the survey is focused. The second prerequisite to survey designs, the specifications of the population to which the inquiry is addressed, affect decisions that researcher must make both about sampling and researcher.
Next is the third important factor in designing and planning a survey is that financial cost. The larger a single expenditure being the fieldwork where costs arise out of the interviewing time, travel time, and transport claims of the interviewers themselves. There are additional demands on the survey budget. Training and supervising the panel of interviewers can often be as expensive as the costs incurred during the time that they actually spend in the field. Questionnaire construction, piloting, printing, posting, coding, together with computer programming, all eat into financial resources. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Mustafidatul Khasanah. Now I'm going to continue to explain about survey sampling and one of types of survey designs that is longitudinal survey designs. I'll explain one by one. Start from survey sampling. What is survey sampling? Now look at the definitions of survey sampling. Survey researchers typically select and study a sample from a population and generalize results from the sample to the populations. Survey sampling is selecting members from target population to be in a sample for a sample survey. What is populations, target populations, and the sample? I'll explain them one by one. Start from the population. The first one is the populations. The populations is the group of individuals having one characteristic that distinguishes them from other groups. The target populations or frame is the actual list of sampling units from which the sample is selected. And the last one is sample. Sample is the group of participants in a study selected from the target population from which the researchers generalize to the target population. For example, Researchers may obtain a list of all secondary high school teachers in one school districts. This list constitutes the target populations or sampling frames. From the target population, researchers choose a sample. At the more specific level, researchers select a sample from the target population. These individuals are the people studied. The next I want to explain about types of survey designs that all focus in longitudinal survey. The term of longitudinal is used to describe a variety of studies that are conducted over a period of time. Longitudinal surveys, on the other hand, are those which study trends over time and usually consist of cohorts or panel respondents. This can be further classified into three types of longitudinal designs, that is, trend studies, cohort studies, and panel studies. When using this method, a longitudinal survey can pay off with actionable insight when you have the time to engage in a long-term research project. Additionally, in a longitudinal study, a survey creator does not interfere with survey participants. Instead, survey creator distributes questionnaires over time to observe changes in participants' behaviors or attitudes. There are three types of longitudinal that I will explain one by one. The first is trend studies. Trend studies focus on the same population of people, use opinion poll surveys to look at their attitudes over time. While the population is always the same, trend studies usually select different market research survey sample from that population. The second one is panel study. A panel survey involves a sample of people from a more significant population and is conducted at specified intervals for a more extended period. One of the panel study essential features is that researchers collect data from the same sample at different points in time. Most panel studies are designed for quantitative analysis. The last one is cohort study. A cohort study samples that is a group of people who typically experience the same event at a given point in time. The next slide is about advantages and disadvantages of conducting longitudinal surveys. The first one, I will explain about the advantages of conducting longitudinal surveys. Greater validation. For a long-term study to be successful, objectives and rules must be established from the beginning. As it is a long-term study, its authenticity is verified in advance, which makes the result have a high level of validity. Longitudinal surveys are flexible. Although a longitudinal study can be created to study a specific data point, the data collected can show unforeseen patterns or relationships that can be significant. Because this is a long-term study, the researchers have a flexibility that is not possible with other research formats. Additional data points can be collected to study unexpected findings, allowing changes to be made to the survey based on the approach that is detected. The next is the disadvantages of longitudinal studies. The first is research time. The main disadvantage of longitudinal surveys is that long-term research is more likely to give unpredictable results. For example, if the same person is not found to update the study, the research cannot be carried out. It may also take several years before the data begins to produce observable patterns or relationships that can be monitored. The last one is higher cost. Without a doubt, the longitudinal survey is more complex and expensive. Being a long-term form of research, the cost of the study will span years or decades compared to other forms of research that can be completed in smaller fractions of the time.
Okay, my name is Nur Fazira. I will continue the explanation about cross-sectional and trend studies. A cross-sectional study is one that produces a snapshot of a population at a particular point in time. Mean of the snapshot here is a representative sample of the population consisting of individuals of different age, different occupation, different educational and income levels, and residing in different parts of the countries. So, in education, cross-sectional studies involve indirect measures of the nature and rate of changes in the physical and intellectual development of sample of children drawn from representative age levels. Then, trend studies. Trend or prediction studies have an obvious importance to educational administrators or planners. The trend study examines recorded data to establish patterns of change that have already occurred in order to predict what will be likely to occur in the future. So, major difficulty researchers face in conducting trend analysis is the insertion of unpredictable factors that invalidate forecasts formulated on past data. For this reason, short-term trend studies tend to be more accurate than long-term analysis. Strengths and weaknesses of cohort and cross-sectional studies. Cohort studies of human growth and development conducted on representative samples of populations are uniquely able to identify typical patterns of development and to reveal factors operating on those samples which equate other research designs, while a cross-sectional design are inappropriate in causal research. For example, the study of staff morale in its association with the emerging organizational climate of a newly opened school lend itself to these types of development research. Longitudinal studies. Core studies suffer several disadvantages. First, that they are time-consuming and expensive. This occurs because the researcher is obligated to wait for raw data to accumulate. Second, there is the difficulty of sample mortality. The problem here is that differences arising in the data from one survey to the next may then be accounted for by differences in the person survey rather than by genuine changes or trends. A third difficulty has been termed control effect, sometimes referred to as measurement effect, means that often repeated interviewing results in an undesired and confusing effect on the action or attitudes under study, influencing the behavior of subjects, sensitizing them to matter that have hitherto passed unnoticed, or stimulating them to communication with others on unwanted topics. Fourth, core study can suffer from the interaction of biological, environmental, and intervention influences. This study considerable problem or organization due to the continuous changes that occur in people's staff, teaching method, and the like, such as changes make it highly unlikely that a study will be completed in the way that it was originally planned. Core study, as we have seen, are particularly appropriate in research of human growth and development. Why then are so many studies in this era cross-sectional in design? The reason is they are less expensive, they produce findings more quickly, they are less likely to suffer from control effect, and they are more likely to secure the cooperation of respondents on one of basis. So generally, cross-sectional design are able to include more subjects than our core designer. The strengths of core analysis are the weaknesses of the cross-sectional design. The first, the cross-sectional study is a least effective method for the researcher who is concerned to identify individual variation in growth or to establish causal relationship between variables. Then, sampling in the cross-sectional study is complicated because different subjects are involved at each age level and may not be comparable. And the last further problem arising out of selection effect and the obscuring of irregularities in growth and in growth weaken the cross-sectional study. And the last, even history analysis. This is a set of statistical techniques whose key concepts include a reg set, means that a set of participants who have yet to experience a particular event or situation. Then a survivor function or survivor curve, means that the decline in the size of rates over time. And the last, the hazard or hazard rate, means that the rate at which particular event occur or the risk of a particular event occurring at a particular time. So, event history analysis suggests that it is possible to consider the dependent variable as predictable within certain time frames for individuals. And then, in event history analysis, the text is to calculate the hazard rate, means the probability of a dependent variable occurring to an individual within a specified time frame. This using log linear analysis to compute the relative size of each several factor or independent variables. And event history analysis also addresses the problem of attrition as members leave a study over time. So from the explanation, we can find that event history is a valuable and increasingly used technique for research. Thank you. Maybe any question?